Okay, great. We're recording now.
Yes.
Great.
How's the sound quality now?
It's you kind of
off my Safari.
Yeah, like that. So maybe to switch off your video is one idea.
Hang on, let me just try that. How's that in terms of sound quality?
Yeah, it's got a lot better quickly. Yeah,
a lot better.
Yeah, definitely. You're not kind of like staccato.
Okay,
and our last conversation, was actually that the person was on a phone. So it's we've been privileged to see you for the short time that we have. Okay, so diving straight in.
Yeah.
So introduce yourself, Sue,
Great.
and then take it from there.
Okay. Great. Well, I've come in with the background of process work, which I don't know how familiar or not you are with process work, but in our own way of approaching things, then with something like this around conflict facilitation, process work works very much with conflict within communities and works in different parts of the world. I've spent time in Israel, actually, in Israel-Palestinian conflict facilitation work. That's my own sort of personal background. I've studied process work for many, many years. I feel very inspired by it. It also works very much with individuals, but it's looking at what is what is unfolding, you could say, for the community, and how to really facilitate an interaction between the different parts of a community. So a group process, just to say a little bit more about that, is that we look to represent the different roles that are present around what's been happening, and we're looking to facilitate between the different roles. So there's a way in which more relationship and a deeper level of understanding can happen. And we do that sort of, it's a methodology that we use when we're working, say, when I work with individuals. I might look at when somebody has a body symptom, for example, there are different aspects to that symptom, but I'm looking to build relationship. It's very much based on systems theory and looking at building wholeness through looking at the relationship between the different parts. And sometimes if we only focus on one part of the system, so in this situation, it may be that there needs to be a healing dialogue with Roger, and where people can speak to him directly about what's happened and to give him the opportunity to take responsibility and accountability for his part in what's been created here. And that feels a really important process in its own right. And I know, Mathieu, you've spoken about that in terms of that being a restorative justice process. But also group process gives the opportunity to really look at it on a more systemic level, meaning that by representing all the different parts of a system, it allows the system to evolve and change. So that might mean that the role, you could say, of the one who is the unconscious oppressor, the one who's not noticing their rank or their power in the moment, is a role that Roger is demonstrating. But there will be others, and it's maybe endemic throughout our society, but to look at that as a system within XR around unconscious use of power, unconscious use of rank, and how that impacts other people within the organization. And so as a system, it's maybe how to support the system to learn, to grow and evolve around becoming more aware of how rank and power is used within the system. process work has a very sort of fluid understanding of rank and power as well, just to say all that. And some of these things, if you want to go ahead and have a group process, and I appreciate that the timeline is needed that to be, and there is a quick response to this situation, or as you need to move forward as quickly as possible. And I also understand that that's not necessarily easy when probably not many people have really experienced a group process to know more about whether you feel that that's going to really work for you as an organization. But yes, in a way that process work takes a more fluid understanding of rank and power, meaning that power is seen in many different forms. One is sort of unconscious use of white privilege, for example. That's white privilege kind of rank and power. As I was saying to Mortier the other day, that there are many types of power. Having access to spirituality is a form of power, and having psychological rank, meaning that you're aware of how you communicate yourself, and you've been through some shit and you've learned from it, you've learned from your suffering, and you've developed an ability to articulate your feelings. It gives you a certain kind of rank and power. And so you might feel low rank in that you don't have you may feel like around gender, you may feel, I feel low rank around gender because of the history of gender dynamics, but actually I've got a lot more psychological rank because I've had to work out stuff, and maybe I'm able to articulate my feelings, and I need to be a little bit of an elder here, even though in another level I feel low rank. So it's kind of helping to open up a kind of more fluid identity about what rank and power you have, and so you can use that as a facilitative tool in how you communicate as an organization to each other and across different groups and within groups, and for yourself as an individual to become more conscious of where you have some rank that you didn't even quite notice. So when you're speaking as a white person to a person of color, to be very conscious of the fact that you're a white person speaking, and that there's a historic privilege or an ability that you may not feel. You may be more aware that you want to become aware of that, but it's just being aware that you don't have to necessarily notice your place as a person of color when you're white, which you immediately have to notice when you're a black person, that somehow it's to do with the way that you don't necessarily notice your rank and power. And so things like that, I think, are very, I think it's very helpful when we're doing a group process to see that this is also a systemic thing. I think that's the opportunity that a group process gives is to work with it more systemically. So that's a little bit about me and about process work. I feel I'm talking a lot and I don't want to just talk. It's sort of helpful to maybe just to see how that is. And I mean, for myself personally, I felt very concerned, moved, touched by what happened in XR. I've not, I mean, in terms of local connection to XR, I'm just active locally. In XR, I've been to London and had demonstrations. I'm sort of in the process of putting together something around all of this rank and power, and how to facilitate conflict work with XR youth. I'm putting that together with somebody down here. Somebody locally has asked us to do that. And I personally feel passionate about this subject because I feel that the kind of enemy isn't just out there, it's how to for all of us to get more conscious about how we use our power with awareness, and that this is somewhere where we all need to kind of skill up, or we all need, and I put myself in that position as well. I think, there's always more to learn, but it's like getting more conscious of how we use our power and how we use it with awareness. And
okay, so
yeah.
I'm going to lightly facilitate this, and so Dahlia had a, because I can see their videos, so they can see them popping their fingers up. So Dahlia had a point, and then unless there's a direct response from that for you, then Mothia will be going.
Yeah, thank you, Sue, very much. You touched on quite a few points that are on our list that needs to be addressed during the process. So that's perhaps why process work would be a very apt way to involve this, or to find a way of working with this situation, because there are so many layers to it. And it has been slightly problematic for us to untangle them. From the first layer of who has been most affected, to the reactions and sort of implied intentions and accusations and isolation and confusion and all of those things. Power has come up as a word a lot. I always prefer in the context of this process, I prefer responsibility, but the way you framed it, I think that's really valuable for the overall process we would be engaging in, and very satisfying for a lot of people who look at this conflict from different angles, because different things have been triggered within them. On a practical level, we thought, because coming out from conversations with people and communities, I've been told today that if we had a process, they need to know quite in advance, a date. And we kind of highlighted perhaps the 15th of December as a potential day to have a day of process, whoever the facilitator will be. If we were to do that, how could a day look for you, and what would be your recommendation of who should be there? Because within the system of 150,000 rebels signed up within Exile in the UK only, how to bring in the right people, and how would you suggest could a process work on the day?
Well, what I'd say is that it would be good to know it's a whole day, because I think that would be really, really needed. In terms of the content, I'll talk about the content, and then maybe talk about my own perspective on who to have at the day, but I'll come back to that.
Can we just,
so in terms of content,
can I just interrupt very quickly? Sorry. Because the 15th is our kind of sweet spot day, Sunday the 15th. Crucially, is that a day that you are available for, potentially?
Yes, potentially I could be available. I would want to definitely bring 2 more process workers in, because I think it's really, I don't want to just facilitate this myself as the only process worker in the room, because inevitably there will be things that I'm not able to see or to miss. It's just helpful to work as a team. So I did approach another process work colleague to see if she's available. I can see she was available on the 11th, she said. That's the Wednesday. I could see if there's availability for her on the Sunday. She's somebody who's a trained process worker who's also been an environmental activist for many, many years. So it'd be good to have her there. But I would need to check that with a few other people before being able to definitely confirm it.
Okay. I mean, that's the main thing was just checking that you, as the kind of the holder of the process, you were definitely available. And then, because one of the things that we kind of, in a conversation we've just had, we kind of effectively decided that we're going to go for a date and then see what kind of coalesce around that date. And then if basically we've got 2 different but equally great people that can do that date, as in separate processes, then we've just got a difficult choice. But we'd rather have the date confirmed. So that's the only reason why. Now I'll shut up and let you kind of like do the description as to what you were going to go. So that'd be great.
I think just on that, just to follow up on that, Adam, because that totally makes sense about getting the date. Just wanted to check, do you think it's more likely to be London or Bristol, or will that be, because that's partly will be down to people's availability and where they can get to and things like that. Will that partly be down to who's coming, that I imagine that determines where, or is there another possible place where you're thinking to have it? Or had you not got as far as thinking what venue to have? Or, as I say, is that down to who's coming?
Mothia, do you have a point there? Yeah, mute.
Just as a brief, I just said to Sue, we hadn't gone that far, and that I could see either of those places being possible at this stage. Okay. Not to have that as a defining criteria, basically a red line.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. It's partly that I know that I might be more likely to get some process workers based around London. That's partly what I said that, but it's not the most important thing right now. I just thought I'd mention that.
And I think we're more likely to make it around London because for example, if we're getting XR Germany people over, they're going to find it easy to get to London, etc. So that's stars are somewhat aligning there. Okay. Let us know how you think the day would work. Then I think you were going to tell us.
Yes. Well, I'm assuming as well in saying this that the restorative justice process will have already happened, because that feels quite important, that there's been an opportunity for people to speak personally and directly with Roger. And I know that many people who have been affected personally won't have had the opportunity to speak to Roger if it's a smaller and a reduced group at that restorative justice meeting. But there's been a place for some work to have landed. Yeah.
Okay, so important clarification here. We were seeing that we weren't clear, and this is why this conversation's happening, as to whether we could do your process could do most of what the restorative because we're not calling it restorative justice, actually, is the potential thing, because that's Lawrence is more about a restorative process, no justice involved in it. And so what you've been saying, actually, a lot of the things that you've been saying, from my perspective, but that's, I don't want to speak for the others, is kind of ticking a lot of the boxes that I was expecting we would do for the main process. So we would only need to work with you. We wouldn't need to do a restorative process unless you tell us, actually, no, because there's some special things that you don't feel that you fulfill. But that's my, so that's be a question that we'd need to explore in this conversation. But Mothia's got maybe a direct point to that as well.
Mm-hmm. Mothia, do you want to say?
Oh yeah, sorry, just yes, I was just to update. So Lawrence Kirshen was the one who was looking at the restorative process, and as Adam was saying, I think we're clearer now as to what these different processes are. And yeah, I think there's just there could be there's a main one process, but we could also think about what may not be covered in one could come out in a later process as well. But let's just focus on the 16th at the moment, as to or 15th, sorry, as to what would happen. But that will be the main, rather than having an earlier process, as kind of what we had in an earlier discussion. I think we're now looking at, okay, the 15th is the main process, and let's see what happens, what can fit into that day. What can be done.
I see. Okay. So all I'm thinking is that if this is the main piece of facilitation around the process, that this might be the first time, just so I understand then, that Roger will be meeting the the kind of directly the reaction and response, and the sense of the opportunity to speak about what's actually happened. So I think as a facilitator, I think that's what's good about that, is that that's an opportunity to really, for that process to be more transparent with perhaps with potentially a larger number of people. I think I'd need to be aware of how to take care of Roger, and also to make sure that he's supported in that, to be able to feel that he can give a kind of, he's not feeling overly isolated, he's feeling supported by the facilitator, to be able to meet the reaction and the impact of what his words have said, so that he can also go through a process, if you like, to take accountability, and to I'd need to think how to hold that as a facilitator. And I suppose part of me had been thinking the restorative process would be a smaller group where he could maybe be supported to speak about that. But I think if we brought that to the group process, I think what I would do on a day would be, I think we'd need to give a bit of background to how group process works, so people understand what the process involves. We'd need to say a little bit about the process work methodology, which is that we work with hotspots. We look at where things are really hot. We look at the polarizations that are happening at the hotspots. So at this interaction with Roger, there's some really polarized and strong reactions. So we need to find. So they would need to be represented. But I would explain the methodology for that, and we would be looking to facilitate the interaction. So I could say a little bit about the theory, you could say, behind it. I think we would need to probably jump into the group process pretty quickly, in terms of that things would be really hot in the room, and it's quite hard when things aren't brought out. There's only so much you can speak before things need to be processed. So the group process, myself and the other facilitators would then facilitate a group process. So those different reactions would need to have an opportunity to be expressed and spoken. And we do that by setting up roles in the room. So someone who is representing or coming who has felt personally impacted as a disabled person could have a role, and they could speak what they want to speak, and then they're free to step out of a role, and someone else from the group can go and stand in that role, who understands, who has a feeling connection. They may not be a disabled person themselves, but they have a feeling connection to that role. They're able to hold the role, and that disabled person is free to move out of the role. So we start to identify the roles in the field, and we facilitate an interaction between them. And quite often there's very strong feelings, but what we're looking to see is sort of momentary resolutions, where you could say Roger as a human, he's an individual, and he's also a role. So we would need to be sure that he is able to take accountability as an individual for what has happened, but also recognize that there is a role here that is around unconscious use of power. And so we would need to frame that and need to work with them, because I think it's quite important. Roles are really helpful, but I think when there's something as personal as this, then there's also a need for accountability. Dalia.
How many people can you envision in the room? I understand from your previous experiences in the Israel-Palestine conflict that perhaps you've been dealing with bigger groups. What is in the case of perhaps having 2 or 3 facilitators in the room, what would be the maximum amount of people being able to be present there? Just for me to
to get an idea of it. Yeah.
To envision it.
Yeah.
Just some. Yeah, I just need to somehow see it, and then.
Yeah. Well, I think even, I mean, in Israel, Palestine, we had groups of about 20, 25. I mean, you can always have more, but I think for that to be able to be, for people to feel they can participate. Otherwise, there's a lot of people who can feel that they're on the sidelines and it's hard to come in, or they don't quite know how to speak what they need to speak. So I would say something around that kind of size, personally, is around the kind of right kind of size for that. And I would imagine it would be important that, because in a way what we're saying is that this is looking at raising the awareness of unconscious use of power on a systemic level. It would be good to have people there who represent different aspects of XR, who can then feed back to their own kind of circles and loops, and that this is a kind of collective learning pot, you could say, a collective experience. And also because the sort of dilemma for Roger is that he's speaking as an individual, but he represents a whole organization, and you can't separate that. And so I think it's really important that this process is transparent through the different aspects of the organization. And inevitably, Mothia.
Yeah, so thanks. Just trying to envisage what it looks like. So
Yeah.
When you say 25 people all in the room, are they all standing and then moving around into different places that you're moving them to represent a specific role within the system? Secondly, I just want hypothetically or theoretically, is it Roger himself that is there, or could somebody be in Roger's place so that Roger can then see himself in the system?
Yes.
And then thirdly, on transparency, are you willing, is it okay to be videoed live so other people can, does that add some advantage or disadvantage to the process?
Yes. I think in terms of the first question about how people are positioned in the room, that usually what we do is, I mean, people can start off in a circle, and then what we do is we start to name roles, and those roles are laid out in the middle of the circle. So people who have a perspective to bring, we then invite them into the middle, and that they're set up as a role to speak from that position or that place. And others stay on the side. Some people are free to get up and move around. People are free to come in and stand next to somebody. If you feel that someone's speaking and it actually resonates with what you feel, then you can come and stand with them. So suddenly maybe you've got 2 or 3 people who are occupying a role in the room. And then 1 or 2 of them might want to move out, and other people might want to come in and stand in that role. That what we're doing is encouraging a feeling of fluidity as well. And there may be people who might take one role, which is the one maybe that's somewhere around someone who's been impacted, but then who may want to, for a moment, go and stand in the role of where they know they've practiced unconscious white privilege, say. And they may want to say, I can speak from this place. I know that I have had experience of that in this organization. I just want to own that and take responsibility for that. So there's the freedom for people to begin to move. And some people never leave the side. Some people never want to come into the middle, and that's absolutely fine. Some people want to represent a voice that's maybe a little bit outside of the immediate situation. And we would, as facilitators, want to encourage people to feel that then they can bring their voice in. It's part of our job is to notice what's on the edges that's not quite coming in. So that there's a sense in which, we're not just focusing on the big conflict at the beginning, but we're inviting a possibility for different voices to be heard. And like I say, we're looking at momentary mini resolutions. So we might say, can we just hold this spot for a moment? If there's a lot of energy, can we hold this spot for a moment and slow right down and just stay with this spot? So that's the kind of way that it works. Some people stand up, some people sit down. Darla, you had a question about that?
It's not so much a question. It feels very appropriate to what we are facing with this situation because of its complexity. So it just really resonates with me, and I can see it, and I can see all the different voices coming up, the global south, the people representing the global south screaming out, why are you not hearing us, the power, all the different layers. I can hear it. So I feel and think that this process would be very healing, or has potential for great healing and coming together and seeing things in a new way for all involved, whatever their role or position or voice is. And it will enable empathy for all the other voices, as hopefully. And then perhaps anything that has not been covered, or things that need to be covered and be changed with on a systematic level within the Exile structure, is then something, more on a structural level, something the SOS or conflict team could then pick up and work on and implement that within the system after there's a sort of another internal process, which is more, structural, after this process has happened. And I see I interrupted you. I'm not sure, did you speak to the possibility of it being live streamed or recorded?
Yes, I think
interrupted with.
But I just want to appreciate the points you're bringing, because they're really, really important. And I think we need to come back to that, about the structural response following this. So I want to come back to that as well. There were two other things. One was about the live recording, and the other one was about Roger, someone else being able to really take his position. I think the only thing about live recording, obviously, is that that I guess everybody, we need to make sure everybody coming is aware of all of that's totally transparent. But I know that you'd be thinking about that. And if it's going to then, so one is actually having live access, which is important, but then to be aware that people could use that and cut and paste it. And I guess some people might have concerns about how that's used. And we might need to talk a bit more about that, I think, if that's going to be the case, because also as a facilitator, that can feel, if people could use that in some way, that they could use it against you, and because it goes out it goes out onto the great big net. So you have to weigh that up in tandem with the fact that it would make it a lot more transparent, and it would make it much more of a wider level accountability, which I can see would be really useful for everything. I think the other thing is, if it's live recording, then how to feed in responses to people, to have an opportunity that people are watching, because if you're watching, then there's a sense of there's an urge for being able to participate in some way, and just to feel that there's a place where your voice can be heard in that, I think would be quite important as well, even if it's not directly always brought in, because there'll be plenty going on in the room at the time, but also just to think about that, I think. But personally, I think I would err on the side it's a good idea, just for the reasons that it opens it out. But I think if it's going to be, I don't know how that can be done in a way that also takes care of it being misused. And I don't have a response, because I'm not really a techie type of person, but that would be a few thoughts that come to mind about it. I think with Roger, I think absolutely it might be good for Roger to try stepping out. He's going to be very much in a position where he may feel overwhelmed and unable to respond directly, which is a possibility. And it might be good for him for a moment to feel he can step out and someone else hold a role. But like I say, I think the other point that needs to happen is that there's a way in which he does need to feel that he can respond personally and take with some responsibility and accountability, and for people to hear that. So I think as a facilitator, both of those are going to be important. Both of those are going to be needed. But yes, one of us as a facilitator will be standing with Roger to help hold that position. It's a tough one to hold as well, to be able to say, to take responsibility. And another level, it's tough to not take it and to leave other people with the impact of that. Yes.
And Motti.
Dalia and Motti, yeah.
Well, do you want to go first? I just wanted to say that we have, some of us, Motti and I, have been in a meeting with Roger this week or last week. When was it?
This morning.
This morning.
No, I know, but in person with April.
Last Thursday.
Last Thursday. So Roger is very much open to speak and to speak to what his thoughts and intentions were, although there will be, I'm sure, very difficult moments for him within a group for many other reasons that may not have necessarily to do with what exactly he said. There are other people that have, other people's, other groups and reactions have escalated the situation potentially. Let's just put it as a question. And that's also important, to not just have one individual, although the initial comment created this avalanche of reactions. However, the overall responsibility, I think it's important to remember, lies within, we all have responsibility in this. And for example, Exa Juice is very, very adamant to say we are not in conflict with Roger.
Yeah.
So we will not take this position. We don't agree with what he said, and we, but we are, this is actually an overall XR problem. And there are many others who are involved, the messaging media team and region, all these different teams and people, so that there's a wider issue. So there is something about, if we were just to hold, or if the facilitators were just to hold this one individual as a specific, sort of the root cause of it, although that may be true, the escalation is not his responsibility, and that needs to be taken into account. And I think there has to be just a very wide briefing for the facilitators to see all the different voices, the conflicts that have coming up with Eurocentric Holocaust and the Global South, the absence of acknowledgement for everything that has happened and is happening in the Global South. That also creates new conflicts. It's almost as if minorities are played out against each other by white people who have never been affected by it. So, there's so many layers to it.
That's right.
Yeah. Just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, really, really, really want to appreciate that. And I think that's where having a role is really helpful, because this isn't, to me, in hearing you and also just reflecting on it myself, it's just, it's so much about, there are so many issues here that also need a space to be named. I mean, one of the issues from doing something like this is that there's going to be a lot of things that won't feel complete. There's only so much you can do. And I think that it's going to be, it's going to invite a space, and that's really important, and things are going to be named. But I think the second part of the day is going to be more about the structural aspect of actually thinking, what is the follow through to something like this? What is needed for this to become more embedded in the whole organization, to actually enable some of those voices that are coming out more strongly now because they have not felt able to be given a voice before, or they felt that there wasn't the space for them to come in, or the unconscious use of power biased the organization that made it harder for other people to express what they needed to say or were wanting to be heard. So how to embed that within the organization, that actually that awareness is held through the system, and what is needed. Is it about having training? Is it about enabling clear and accountable, transparent processes that people feel that they can bring forward what's important? Is it about who's representing those voices within the key organizations? What are the structural aspects that mean that this is then embedded through the system, so there's a better chance for these more marginalized voices to be centralized, to become part of the system. And I think that can only really emerge by exploring it together. I might have ideas, you might have ideas, but it's something that's got to emerge out of the process itself. Mathieu.
Yeah, no, that's great. Some of the key things that I think I was mentioning about there's different people involved. I'm just going to try and give a framework that then of some of the things that are happening to then lead to some exploring a particular steps and see what you feel around those steps. So two of the issues I think around trust and safety. And when we look at trust, just from having looked, and this is just from looking at the facts, I think there's been a lack of trust, and so underlying that, where people are sending things out and not picking up the phone to just talk to somebody, is because that trust had gone, and so there's so there's something about that trust. The other thing is the safety of the process. And when I say safety, I just mean not just Roger. So Darley mentioned that Roger came to that meeting with April, but lots of other people didn't, because they didn't feel that process was going to be safe enough for them to come and participate. So we need to also, as they're kind of trying to work out, how to hold this, is to increase that safety level as much as possible to make it safe. And one thing is that Lawrence Kirshen QC is also Jewish as well, and that's just something we're going to take into account. And the thing that he's a QC as well also gives certain safety to certain aspects of the organism as well. But one of the key things for me that is coming out, and this is just from me sensing into what the future that wants to emerge is calling from us, in a way, I'm going to see it that way. But the status quo world is very much about rights and individualism, and so therefore anything that comes against that is seen as coercion. Whereas for me, there's this thing of that: the higher you step into power, the more responsibility you have, and that responsibility is not a coercion; it's a sense that you need to grow in yourself, and that relates then to autonomy as opposed to individuality. And it's these two kind of worldviews that are almost coming to a place of clash, or not clash, but one is coming to its end. This is how I sense it anyway. One is coming to its end and is trying to. And there's another one that wants to be birthed, and how we gently midwife something at this place of huge tensions that are going deep into the trauma that has come from the right and the forward thinking of individualism that has led to a lot of, you could say, that trauma deep in other systems. So what I'm trying to point is to a particular process that may have. I just want to ask you whether you feel, if you had more time to set up the deep democracy process, would that help you? Because then we could also then see. I'm just wondering whether the Lawrence Kirshen QC, that kind of status quo process, could happen, say, in one day. Then whatever is left behind out of that, and I feel my own sense is that there'll be quite a lot of other stuff that's left behind, or not yet processed, would be processed through your kind of deep democracy process. And there's another layer to this organism as well, which is the international level. So XR Germany and I had a conversation, there's another layer to the system, which is the international layer, whether that can also be another day, in a way, of a systems approach, where it's actually looking at the whole system, not just UK, but the whole system. So there's so I'm just thinking, so that would be just a thought as to those processes, but it takes more time that way. But
yeah, I think there's a lot of things there that sound really. I really agree with, actually, not least the fact that I do believe we're at this this paradigm shift about power and how we use our power with awareness. Just to respond to that part of what you're saying, and I know that power and accountability, Dano, you were saying about that feels really, it is about accountability for what we do, and we might language that as saying it's how we use our rank and power with awareness. So you can't avoid it, can't avoid what you have, but it's how you use it and how you use that to facilitate the whole field, rather than use it to perpetuate a sort of top-down approach. And I think this is a massive collective issue and learning that we're all sort of grappling with right now, but it's what's being birthed. I believe in the background somewhere that this is what's needed. But I think that having different might be that if you feel that working with a group process, maybe it's something that doesn't just happen once, but actually this could be a model. If you think it works, it could be a model to actually process some of these deeper level tensions, because the thinking in process work is always that unless you process these tensions, things can't move clearly. That it kind of slows you down. There's a pressure to be quick and move on quickly, but if you don't make space to process these background tensions, then it has a way of coming out. People get hurt. There's a kind of it kind of disturbs the field, you could say. So it's a kind of way of let's get the process to really support that deeper level of interaction and to see where these processes are happening. And so then, hopefully then the way is clear to make clearer decisions and to get on and deal with, to address that collectively. So may need to be more than one group process. I could easily imagine that, if you like it as a methodology and you think it really works. And I think the other thing you were mentioning about whether to do the restorative process, we're not calling it restorative justice, but the restorative process with Lawrence, and then having this as a deep democracy process. I think that's the other option, really, is to set the date for this a bit later, so that it's more chance that people can make it. If you go for the 15th of December, I guess the risk there is that, maybe some people can't make it because you're getting close to Christmas time. So some people who might want to be there can't be there. And that you do the restorative process first. Or we just jump in and do this, assuming I can get some other facilitators on board that I feel I can kind of trust and I feel good about working with. And we just jump in and do this. And, if things are really left that aren't addressed through that process, that part of the structural afternoon would be to look at, what is more needed to be done in relationship to Roger more directly. I don't know. I guess those are the two directions. I think if you can get I think that would be my only. I think that just getting the people there for the 15th, I guess that might be a bit of a challenge, but it's not impossible, because the feelings are running high about this right now. And so, people want to see and participate.
For me, what I suggest is that, because my understanding is there's not one person who's been directly affected by this. In a sense, like if somebody's from Exile Germany or an Exile Jewish or any of the other affected groups that we're talking about, if one person can't make it, there is potentially dozens, if not hundreds, that could potentially be there in their place. And whilst some might be more eloquent or more X, Y, and Z, especially if we're talking about up to 20 people being there, we might have 2 or 3 people from certain groups representing. So then it's less kind of focused on that. But just one question I would actually have about the 20. If we had 20 plus people in the room, plus Roger, plus the facilitators, how's that kind of work for a process like this, where it's whilst yes, in theory and in practice, this is about the system, it's about everything around Roger, but the reason why people are in that room is because of Roger. So can you just give us a little bit about how you handle that when, you know, everybody's going to be looking at Roger in many senses in this process, and yeah, how it doesn't become potentially, in a sense, overwhelming for him, even though, yeah, whereas, because when we talked to Lawrence, he was talking about 6 to 8 people in the room, which is kind of a bit more manageable. 20, yeah. And I'm sure you've got ways and means of doing it, but I'd just like to find out.
Yes. Well, yes. Well, what I'd say about that is that I think we would need to introduce what a group process is and talk about working with this on a systemic level and give a kind of background to that before jumping into the group process, and to name that that what you're saying really, that we're here through what's happened in relationship with Roger and other people and the impact of that. But that we are approaching this as facilitators as an issue that needs to be addressed on a personal level, but that it's also a systemic issue. So I think we would say that at the very beginning, and say that we're here to also, one of the learning outcomes for this could potentially be that there's an increased awareness about how all of us are using our power with or without awareness. That as facilitators, that's really important, that it's not just landing with one individual, because in process work we always say you never have a process with one person, you have a process with a process, which sounds terribly abstract, but there's a kind of field effect that this if you were, say, to take Roger out, my guess is that this needs to still have this dialogue and this conversation, and that things are hot because there are things that people haven't felt able to bring themselves in around a number of issues. And so what happens is that the field is activated, and sometimes it takes an individual or a relationship for that to kind of, it's almost like information in the system that then gets downloaded through 1 or 2 individuals. And we talk about that as the dreaming of the field, that there's a lot that's kind of held in a field. There are marginalized voices, there are more mainstream voices, but when there's an edge in a system to allow that information in from the more marginalized voices, it very often is 1 or 2 individuals that end up being in the hot spot, in the hot seat. And they are communicating, they're downloading, if you like, that information, that things that need to be addressed more widely. So we would take that approach as facilitators, and I think that's where talking about group process, our own background, how we're framing this, the context in which we're speaking about it, that would be really important to do first. I mean, I think there is a place for having a restorative process directly with Roger. He could potentially get overwhelmed, and I think if the decision is not to do that first, but just to jump into the group process, I think I would also be naming that Roger's a person, but also there is a role here and that we will be inviting him to step out and for someone else to step into the role that he's been occupying, so that he can step out of it as well, because otherwise he's not going to be able to respond authentically in a way if he gets into such an overwhelm. So that's part of the facilitation method, you could say.
Great. And I had a few questions because I bunched them up waiting. Something that, in a sense, you can almost no this one. I think I know what the answer is that one of the reasons why, interestingly, the restorative process, especially because it's next door to being a restorative justice process and it's being done by a QC who's an ex-lawyer, it kind of feels like more familiar to people. It's kind of like they go, oh, right, this guy's an ex-lawyer. Right, I get why he's doing this.
Yeah.
Whereas your process, if we chose that we go straight to your process and not do Lawrence's or something similar to Lawrence's first, say, people might go, oh, that's just XR. Sure, they could, unless we language it well, unless we communicate the story well, they could go, oh, it's just a bloody bunch of hippies just trying to basically shirk responsibility by getting in this woman from Totnes or wherever she is, right? Now, I mean, I'm kind of broad brushstroking, but I think you can tell where I'm coming from here.
Yeah.
And it's, all it is in the sense, the yes-no is like, would you feel confident enough, you don't have to feel utterly confident enough that you could work with us to create a language so that we could communicate to the movement. This is not for the outside world, it's not for Joe Public necessarily, but for our movement, that this is a robust and authentic process which will that's kind of have that accountability, have that responsibility that you're talking about.
Yeah. I think that I guess I'm only hesitating because I continue to see two sides of why it would be useful to have a restorative process first, and then another side of me that feels that it would be good to jump in and do it as a collective group. But I think that if I just take the side that believes that it could be good to have a restorative justice process first, I kind of feel that it's something that would show Roger's commitment and you as an organization's commitment to engaging and meeting with him directly, and to look at what's needed for not just an apology, if you like, but actually what's needed for change, that the people impacted need to be able to speak, don't they, what they want to see changes. And that's a process that could go out, that people, like you say, would be able to relate to it. They'd feel that something had been done. They would know that there was a clear procedure that had been followed. And I think there is something very, it makes it easier to relate to and easier to communicate as well and say, yes, we're doing this. It's harder to sometimes explain what a group process is all about until you've really experienced it. And I also think if you did go down the route of the restorative process first, there's a huge amount here that could be done in a group process. That could still happen on the 15th if I can get the right facilitators. But you could maybe have the restorative process before then, or we could move the group process to January. There's going to be plenty here for a group process to really pick up and work on.
But just to kind of like zero in, is in a sense, from your experience in other areas, in situations where there's been an individual who's affected people, and then, no, this doesn't mean that you've dealt with this yourself directly, because this is a fairly unusual situation. That you've seen where it's been communicated to an organization or the public or a movement or whatever it is, and then people have kind of gone, yeah, get it, because effectively I think, to be honest, I know my answer, which is I'm a part of my job is as a storyteller. I think we can tell the story of this, but I wanted you to feel as though that this is something that you'd be comfortable with being part of telling that story, because part of the story, one of the most important parts of the story, is what we tell people before Roger and their group enters that room, as well as what happens once they've left, once they're in the room, and then once they've left the room. There's a whole kind of narrative journey that we're going on here. And it's about if you've seen that's been communicated well enough in historic situations, which don't have to be being directly related to you.
Yes. I mean, I feel confident that we can communicate what we're doing and set a clear framework for that and represent that. I think between us, we've got a lot of experience that we could effectively do that. And I think that that the methodology of group process is that there comes a moment where it comes down to, it's a role, but it's a personal response. There'll be a point where we will be saying to Roger, inviting him to see if there's to make a personal response in direct relationship, that will be part of the group process. But I think in terms of the preparation, I think that we can communicate what we're doing. I think what is harder to say for sure is that I know that part of group process, there will be things that will still be unanswered at the end of it, because we can't deal with everything all together in one group process. But I feel that there's the capacity there I feel there's the capacity there to work with Roger and to work with the wider field. But I trust our ability to communicate it. Yes, I do, if that's your question.
There's been Mothia and Dahlia. Dahlia, you're muted.
I'm muted. Yeah. So I can't remember what I was about to say. I feel very confident that this process could work for what is needed. I also think that at this point, almost any process will do, as long as there is a process and people feel, I mean, this is not how I'm approaching it, but there is a process and that people will be heard. And that's what people and the movement needs. I'm just a little bit wary about just mentioning two parties, as in Roger and the others, because I don't think that quite, that doesn't reflect the reality accurately.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring it back to that.
Yeah, sorry, I think you're right. Sorry, I think it's in a sense that, thank you for mentioning that, Dahlia. I want to make this direct point here, is because this is a beautiful process for me to see, actually, because it's like that. There's that dualistic kind of like binary thing, which I definitely have been part of, and the XR is helping me learn that there are other ways of looking at it, and you've just reminded me that the languaging, etc., can easily flick back to that, but also partially it's true. It's that people, I think what I was also representing, that people can think in that. That's what most people think in, and especially when they're stressed and frustrated, as I think they are in this. But our job is to remember to stay centered in this. So thank you for reminding me, Dahlia. But I can see that Mothia is keen to ask a question as well.
Yes.
Yes, but around this, what is needed, I guess, and I personally feel that I want to make process work shine as much as it can, using this situation as it's emerging. and then there's other part, and there's a part of me which is going, how does that work? Because, okay, with my lawyer's hat on, if you want to say, when things go wrong, there's blame also, or things. So looking at liability, not liability necessarily in the terms of insurance, but just thinking, okay, if it doesn't work as well, if we go first with this process, then we go, oh, it's just a top nest thing, and that's why it didn't work. Also, we've got Exat Germany, who's really involved, and having the label of a QC and to be able to give it to the QC and say, you do it, and then it's a contained process. I'm just wondering then what we feel is it then highlights what additional things is coming from a different kind of process. If it works with a certain amount of credibility on certain things, but doesn't manage other aspects, and then it just gives people the wake up call to say, this is why we need something more holistic, because that's just my feeling, a feeling around that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the QC had, we don't need to reenact the system we are living in. I hear you, Moji. I fully hear you. You know, I'm also with the legal background. I get that, but I think we don't have to be confined by that in the process of making a decision. I don't think these are measurements we necessarily need to. They are not. They're not really relevant for the world we are wanting to create anyway. One, I hear you, and secondly, I wonder if this is a conversation we just need to have within the group. This is not a conversation that we need to give to Sue, because we are inviting Sue to have a conversation with, whilst taking her opinion. Perhaps we don't need to burden her with these sort of different aspects. Although so far it has been very helpful to hear, obviously, what Sue says. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I kind of I think yes, we've explored that side of things enough and talk about it. I think that one final question that I had is, obviously we put together that kind of draft for 4 focus areas, with actually potentially a separation between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So now that was not hard and fast at all. It was, I actually put it together more just so that people could help get their heads around that there are 4 different processes, 4 different things going on, and that we might want to, we might separate them completely. So there's 4 separate processes, or there might be, yeah. And so if we take effectively, there's a blank sheet of paper here, and those are the 4 areas that we could do with covering somehow through this process. And we might be able to do quite a lot of them on one day, or might only be able to do one of them on one day. Be curious about your comments if you've got a blank sheet of paper but aware of these kind of 4 main areas.
You asking me, Adam?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Can we just pull up that piece of paper? Hang on. I'm sorry, I've been with clients all day today, so I've had a quick look at it.
I can put it in the chat, so I'll put it in the chat for you.
Hang on. Hang on, I've got it here. Okay, potential processes. I've got it now. Right. Okay. So so you got the fact finding that was felt to be important, right?
Yeah, it starts off with the direct effect, line 8.
Line 8, sorry, the direct effect. Okay, yeah. This restorative process you're calling that the group process, are you?
Yeah, one of the things is that basically, to a certain extent, ignore everything from apart from only you focus on, in terms of just explanation, the first 3 columns,
Yeah.
ignore the rest of it, because that's just us making guesses, basically pure guesses as to what we do here. So we put you in certain boxes and we didn't know, it's just guess. And partially it was almost, I think it was a good thing so we could censor a few people, and so they'd know that we're actually thinking and we've got names against it, and that gives people comfort. And then we have a conversation with you, and then everything can change, and that's fine. So you start with those first 3 columns.
I mean, the direct effect of the Holocaust comments, there definitely needs to be a place for that. And my only thought is that, I guess where I'm going with this at the moment is I kind of feel like there are some widely differing needs, you could say, that are kind of emerging. And one is this sense of having an overall opportunity to process some of these more marginalized voices and explore the theme of power and accountability. And then you've got a direct effect of the comments that were made and the opportunity to process any of those things on a more personal, it feels like that needs to be a particular kind of relational process. And I think my concern about trying to heap it all into one thing in this moment, it's just what I'm feeling in this moment, is that if we only do the group process, that somehow some of these more, the chance for people who've been directly impacted to speak more personally with Roger, that I know that we're saying this is a systemic thing and that it needs to be opened out, but there seems to be a place where that really needs to be held quite firmly, that those directly impacted or people who represent them really have a chance to speak together. So certainly having a place to do that. We can work on that in the group under a group process model, but there's also a lot of other things that want to come in to the group process. So I want to be sure that everybody who wants to speak and process with Roger has had the opportunity to do that. And I suppose what I'm slightly concerned about using a group process is that it's got quite a wide remit at the moment. We might want to focus.
Wow. Everybody stuck their fingers up at the same time.
Sorry, I can't see the fingers and look at the form at the same time.
No, it's fine. No, I was just kind of like that you prompted something clearly that was wanting interest. I was definitely one of the most recent people to speak. What I'm going to do is, which one of you two was the historically oldest person to speak? Dahlia. So I think Motti is suggesting Dahlia. You go first.
So if we were thinking about conversations with Roger and very obviously affected groups such as Exarchus has no interest at this point to have a particular meeting with Roger before any process, just because they want to engage. But speaking for that group, they want to engage. Same with the Disabled Rebels and the Rainbow Rebellion, just to speak for the communities I have contact with. So they would benefit from being just there at the process, sending representatives who speak for the group.
Okay, that's really good to know. I think you maybe had said that and I hadn't quite taken that in as clearly as I have in this moment. So thank you. Yeah.
The thing I was just going to add to that, so for example, so that group process, whatever the process is, you've got Exarchus and you've got the other marginalised groups, and then you also have this other voice which is being very historically marginalised, and is very strong at the moment, is all the other previous genocides that have happened against the global South. And do you think all that can be contained in? It's just that's what I think coming into something you just mentioned, that this is also there, and it may not be even directly related to Roger saying something. It's just emerging, and it's like that's a huge thing. And I'm just trying to see how those two things can be held.
Yes, I think that's right. That there's a lot here. I think, like I say, one thing we'd be saying at the beginning is that this is an opportunity to name some of those more marginalized voices, and for people to feel they have an opportunity to bring and express what they need to be heard in. But there's a lot that we're not going to be able to, there's going to be dynamics raised, and we're not going to be able to process all those different dynamics in one group process. But what tends to happen is that there's a particular hotspot in the room, and we tend to stay with that, and we process that and trust that that has meaning for the whole field. And that what we'll do with that then is that the outcome of that, exploring that dynamic, will then look to see, and that would be the suggestion maybe for the afternoon, is how to take what's happened in that particular dynamic, how to then replicate that on a more systemic level, and what's needed. So there's a kind of trust in terms of that by working with one issue, it affects it for the whole issue, all the different issues, because it's a systemic process.
Yeah. So just to get clear in my mind, I'm 98% clear, is that you are saying that basically we could work using the process that you're talking about here on the direct effects of the Holocaust, and then it's possible and even likely that will then go into more systemic things, but not definitely. It might just stay on the direct effects because that's where the hotspot is, or it might quickly move away from the hotspot of the direct effects. But what you do is you work with the room, work with the energies, work with the people to honour where the hotspots are in your language. Am I understanding correctly?
That's correct, in the sense that the group process, we have to some extent work with what's in the room, and there may be some other dynamics that seem hotter, but yeah, we could just stay with the Holocaust. But I think if we did that and other people were there from other groups, I think it would be really important then to make sure that there's an opportunity, more like a shared forum, for people to actually speak what they want, what they feel needs to be addressed within XR, and that they have the opportunity to bring that forward, and what they think is needed for the system to change, because it's people are being invited. So yes, so it is a possibility that we'll focus just on the Holocaust and the comments that were made, but yeah, there certainly will be opportunities. We'll need to make sure of that for other people.
So I've just seen that Dahlia posted that she needs to leave in a couple of minutes.
Yeah,
I'm personally feeling like we've done a lot of. I really appreciate your time. It's an hour and a half. It's been fabulous, very rich for me, and seeing good XR jazz hands from the other two. I'll
put my video back on. Hang on.
Yes, wonderful. It'd be lovely to see you before we go. I'm feeling complete. I think if you go, Dahlia, Mothia, maybe you and I stay on. Sue, you go as well at the same time, and then we'll be in touch within a day or so. I would very much imagine.
I'm very happy.
Thank you so much. Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Sue. That was really, it made me feel much calmer about the whole situation. The possibility of having it all there. It can all live with each other in the same space, which it is doing anyway.
Yeah.
And that can be picked up. Yeah. Thank you for giving so much time to us. I have to go because my little one needs to go to sleep and my older one wants to talk, and it's all happening. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me in, and thank you for your time. And if you want anything written from me about group process, I'm happy to do that. This has been recorded, but I can see what I can send you. What was the other thing I just quickly wanted to say? I will need to check on dates as well. I'll look anyway to see if I can find people for the 15th. You may decide you don't want to go ahead with that straight away, but if you do, I need to also make sure I can find people. I think the other thing I just wanted very quickly to say is that Arnie Mindell is Jewish. He may not know that. A lot of people who work in the process work community are Jewish because of everything that's happened in their history. They have developed process work out of their commitment to become a more inclusive and diverse community and understand the impact of oppression. So I didn't say that at the beginning, and I realised that's part of the lineage here as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And just as a final comment on just a very practical thing, Dali, you don't need to stay for this, but it's just about money basically. It's just that money is not a hurdle in the sense of with this. We're not we have money in the organisation, but we just wanted to find out that what your position is around the financial side of this.
What my position is, what I would charge,
yeah,
or
what we charge, what we need to cover for the other process workers, etc.
Yes, well, travel expenses would be good. My travel expenses usually coming up from London from Totnes is usually about 100 quid, 90 quid or something like that. And then, I mean, I don't know how much money my rates vary according to how much money there is in the pot in a way, because I work with sort of, small groups and bigger groups. But yeah, certainly like £250 or something like that would be great. But I don't know what the other people charge, and I would also be willing to charge a bit less to have more facilitators there, because I think for me this is more about getting the right team and making sure that we're the right team together.
Yeah, we kind of need to worry about the money side of things. You need to kind of set to a certain extent what your parameters are, and then it's our choice to work if we want to work with that. And then so I'm assuming that if we're to bring in, what's the what would you, for something like what we've been describing, how many others would you like to have, shall we say, is the best way of putting it?
I would like to have 2 other facilitators. Normally we just do it with 2 facilitators, but I'd actually quite like to have 3 facilitators for this, because I want to make sure there's a lot of diversity of different issues, and I just want to make sure we've got our radar screen out for that. So yeah.
Okay,
but great. I mean, we could maybe have an agreed sum between us, how much we would charge, and maybe because there's 3 of us, I'd have to discuss money with them.
I think it's given a ballpark figure, that's the key, and the number of facilitators, and is the date 15th, and that's a really core thing that we need to start working from. Like if that the 2 others and you together, if you can know that that's going to happen, then we can move from there.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Great.
Wonderful. Okay then. So I think I'm complete, Motti.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful, and thank you for rich conversation, and I think we've gone through lots of, I just feel like the more we learn, and we can make wiser decisions. And so
yes.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you both, and thank you for your openness as well, and I'll leave you to it. I'll just wait to hear from you then, shall I? Yeah. And I'll let you know, and let me know if you need anything else from me at this point.
Yeah, thanks, Sue.
All right. Ciao.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Shall I stop recording now?
Yes, good idea.